Ahoy! Welcome to Rats Chat. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and tonight my guest is none other than one of the hardest working men in the hobby today, Brian Shutter. How you doing today, Brian?
Good. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, John.
It's a pleasure to have you. With this series, my goal is to kind of get under the hood a little bit about people and their creative process and also see what brought them to the hobby and if we could kind of find a connection, a correlation between the two, because a lot of things that I think happen in this hobby are like peanut butter and jelly. They go together. Two great tastes that go great together, and certain formulative things that happen to us when we're kids lead us to the kind of stories that we tell today. So, for our viewers who may not be familiar with Neon Lords of the Toxic Wasteland, why don't you give them a primer on what it's all about?
So the big elevator pitch, as they say, it is a 80s, 90s post-apocalyptic tabletop role-playing game. Essentially, it's Judge Dredd, RoboCop meets GWAR and the Toxic Avenger.
Which is, to me, like check, 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 check off all my boxes for things that I grew up loving and I still love to this day. What was your entry point into tabletop RPGs?
So the entry point was a second grade Hero Quest, the Milton Bradley Games Workshop co-production board game came out. And being in second grade, I mean, the rules were simple enough, but you always went into kind of did your own thing, and it ended up becoming a like very rudimentary role-playing game at that point, and like kind of making up your own scenarios and all that stuff, and then kind of acting it out, rolling the dice from the Hero Quest proper. I saw like one of the starter boxes at Hesselson's, the one that we talked that the it's fun to poke in the corners,
Yeah.
that I added to Season's Eatings. A little side note. That's actually a big part why I put it in there. And it was, yeah. So the D&D box, it wasn't a red box. It was like had a CD in it.
Oh, okay. Yes, that
Are
was
you
that
are you
point in
familiar
time.
with this one?
Yeah, absolutely.
The CD you can listen to still to this day on YouTube, and it's still phenomenal. It's like dramatized, I guess, if you will,
Oh my God. Yeah.
the playing and like the action. And I used to fall asleep to listening to it as a kid all the time. So like there is a gap in time. Like it's not like, well, second grade, like that box probably came out when I was in sixth, seventh grade. So there's like a couple year gap because there's this thing called the Nintendo Entertainment System. You might have heard of it. It kind of came out and like changed everyone's lives.
I mean, in fairness, it did derail many a child's creative endeavors because up until that point, we had Atari, we had ColecoVision. Nothing looked anywhere near like it did in the arcade. Yet, if you had Nintendo and you had Kung Fu, it looked just like it did in the stand-up arcade game. Same thing with Super Mario Brothers, even Castlevania, to a degree.
Yeah.
And I remember, why did you go outside, Johnny? I got to beat this level, Mom. I'm lost. I am in Hyrule. I can't think about going and playing with my buddy down the block. If he's not sitting next to me, then I ain't leaving the house.
It was a huge, like, yeah, like video games. And it wasn't till like older where I real like there was a correlation, not correlation, but like a marriage between the two of like a physical digital gaming rather than like one or the other. But I mean, because like, I mean, it was revolutionary. Like, if you weren't there, you don't know like how huge the Nintendo was on the grips of the youth of America, and globally. But like, I can only speak for the northeast sector of the world.
Yeah, I mean, it got everyone everywhere. I always try to not be the old guy. Like when I was your age, I walked backwards to school in the snow kind of person. But, I often talk about how pre-internet, there was just such a magic to the world where
It's beautiful.
everything was a place and time. And if you weren't there, you didn't just get to experience it after the fact. You didn't look it up on your phone and watch a 15-minute clip, and then your ADD checks in, you're watching another 15-second clip or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You had to be there, you had to be present. So,
Mm-hmm.
with that in mind, did you have a gaming group growing up to play RPGs with?
Yeah, so there was so the comic store was called Comics for Collectors. There's still one in Ithaca today, but the Elmira branch closed. Next to it was Man, I wish I remember the name of the store. We had a hobby shop, if you will, where that's where we got into the magic, the regoogling, and Werewolf the Apocalypse was the cool kid card game at the time, and we would go there and spend our Saturdays rolling dice with a couple young lads that we did.
Now, at that point, were you just doing modules or had you started considering writing your own stuff?
Oh, we made our own game. Remember, so that's where that card. I wish I'll take a picture of that card that I sent to the group. That's from that game that I made in the early days. Here, I'll help you. Here's the card. Oh, pachow right there.
Boom, ka-chow.
Yeah.
And as you know, as a person who is in the hobby, you can't just write them. You got to get up and do videos like this, and you have to introduce people to more of yourself than you would, back in the day when you just kind of wrote them and showed up at the cons, and it was like, oh, wow, that's what he looks like. But knowing how we have to put more of ourselves into our work these days, and not just the creative aspect of it, the promotional aspect of it, how do you kind of differentiate the two? Because, for people who are going to look up Neon Lords of the Toxic Wasteland after seeing this, it is very dialed in as far as the aesthetic of it goes, the idea, the imagery, you know, versus say a lot of other games where it's like, we have a dragon
Right.
and it kind of lacks identity to a degree because everyone's got a dragon. So
Hmm.
what is it for you that you try to bring in from, the influences that you had growing up, the things that you like now to really transfer that to the visual and brand identity of Neon Lords of the Toxic Wasteland?
Oh, that's a deep question. So off the just the skin level, a lot of it is the references and stuff in the book always get brought up. People ask, so then it's always showing people like the stuff that I love, still to this day, like being able to spread the joy of like all these movies and music and video games that possibly people never got to experience in their youth, and finding them even when you're older and stuff, because there's always stuff we're finding. So being able to show people all the stuff that made the game what it is is a huge factor.
And you recently did that with NeonCon, which was a Neon Lords of the Toxic Wasteland online convention, which I thought was great. I thought it was a great time because it really did bring a lot of people who are fans of the Neon Lord and Neon Lords of the Toxic Wasteland to actually play the adventures. Because that's a thing that, a lot of people don't think about in the hobby when they create these books is like, will people actually play the game I wrote?
Right.
And then you also, at the end of the night, did a video screening. You had people watching a movie live with you over the Discord. And what movie did you show them?
We watched Neon Maniacs.
Amazing.
Yeah, well, the big thing was so the name of the fandom for Neon Lords is Neon Maniacs. That's a twofold name. It's a reference to the movie, and it's a reference to the tag team up between Macho Man and Ultimate Warrior when they were the Ultimate Maniacs.
The best.
Yeah, so there's like a little like double entendre, I guess, if that's what it's called,
Yeah.
to the name. So that a lot of people aren't familiar with Neon Maniacs. It's very obscure, very 80s, and very not done. It's well done. I'm a huge fan of the movie, but it like budget restraints, and they ended up not being able to put in a lot of stuff. So it
Ain't it
was
just
a
the way?
yeah. I mean, Masters of the Universe movie.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But speaking of Masters of the Universe, there's a lot of Masters of the Universe, I think, in Neon Lords. And also there is the other aspect of it, which is, the one deity I think, all Neon Maniacs subscribe to, praise be his name, Lord Randy.
Right.
What about the Macho Man Randy Savage was such an inspiration for you to kind of essentially build the world around Lord Randy?
So what happened was I always wanted to do like a post-apocalyptic something. Like there was like a couple scripts, 'cause I always wanted to make movies. I mean, every kid, you know, wanted to make a movie at some point, right? So there's a couple ideas for some post-apocalyptic stuff. here and there, and it's my favorite genre. Like Italian post-apocalyptic movies is like like my bread and butter. And so kind of like building the world and building the lore. It's like, okay, so it's like far-flung future, but I wanted to like have that 80s aesthetic. So like how is that possible, right? So then like because like Ready Player One does it
Yep.
very well because they're all obsessed with the guy whose name escapes me right now. They're like the hunters, Halloway, right?
Yeah.
So they're all obsessed with Halloway, who was obsessed with the 80s. So like it doesn't really transfer well in the movie. I know this is like a long answer to this, but it doesn't transfer well in the movie, but in the book like the lingo, the everyone dresses like it's the 80s still. And then like it's a very 80s future. And like I wanted to do that in a post-apocalyptic setting, right? So it's like,
Right.
okay, well, so there's no Halloway. We're like millions of years far removed from, you know, John Hughes, right? So
Yeah, of course.
like how do we get there? So like there was the Chronos Ages. So it's like okay, so there's these old like wizard folk who live in these towers, and they're oracles essentially. They inhale the sacred smoke, travel back in time, and see the world of the 80s, and come back to the future and interpret it. Right. This is the
Right.
original. Like this is like eventually things do happen. But so then it was like, okay, so they go back to the 80s, they see everything. What would they think wrestling was? It was like the pantheon of the Greek gods, like the Greek tragedy, on the mat, right? So like it was like, okay, well, and like Macho Man's my favorite wrestler, and the promos were like all amazing.
Oh yeah.
It's like, well, this clearly is Zeus, right?
Of course.
And so it was a throwaway line. It was just like, okay, so like, yeah, the golden goddess is like all the heads of the golden girls, like that's in there, but nobody really like that's okay, that's funny, but like doesn't get the audience. So it was just a throwaway line. The main god for the longest time was Dawn Star, which was it's a satellite that circles the Earth still, and they see it and they're like, oh, that's the god. And then that kind of fell to the wayside because when I during COVID, I put the Google Doc out to the world. I'm like, hey, this is my game. It's free. Check it out and just tell me what you think about it, please. So then, actually, like, because it was COVID, people actually responded. And
Yeah.
now you can't do that, right? Like, no
Yeah,
one's
no.
ever going to respond to you. So, and everything came back about Macho Man being Zeus. And then, like, I didn't come up with Lord Randy be praised. That was like one of the first reviewers.
Listen, it's a happy accident or just
Right.
a happy like because
Happenstance, right?
happenstance I think is a better term for it. There's also the balance, I
Mm-hmm.
think, where you are, you're a creator like me. I love a deep cut, but there is trying to walk that fine line between esoteric and
Yeah.
maybe four people get the joke, but the ones that do, they're driving home thinking about it because it hits them right in the heart and then the nostalgia feels versus making something that's more universal for the people who are only going to see this at the surface level,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually that surface level stuff becomes their deep cut. Like,
Right.
talk to me
Yeah.
about balancing that. How does that work for you?
So it's because it's an assault on all fronts is like what I like to do about it. Like there's some deep cuts that people still have yet to like talk to me about that like those are for me, right? Like those are
Yeah.
the deep cuts for me. And then there's like obviously the Heathers based on the movie The Heathers like that's like universally, loved. People like that movie. There's like Goonies references, like
Oh yeah.
your quintessential 80s references with a dash of Mac and Me.
And that's the best. And you got to put stuff in there for you, and that's just for you. And it's something I've had long conversations about this with my writing partner Gio Colazzo, who co-created 320 RPG with me. You know, you always have to get your own shit in sometimes.
Have to.
And you gotta, it doesn't matter if people aren't going to get it per se. You got to make most of it. I'd say 98% of it, you got to make it so everyone kind of is
Yeah.
in on it with you. But man, nothing makes me happier than getting that like sweet little morsel in of what I know that like my buddy Levi's going to pop for, you're going to pop for. Like when people get it, they're like, yeah, this is
Yeah,
something that's
absolutely.
still just for me.
Yeah, that's and then that's fun because then down the road, man, I wish I had a good example of it, but it does happen where someone will be like, is this that?" It's like, yeah, it is. Well, like
Yeah.
a good one is Rotor. Like the you ever see that? Are you
Oh
familiar
yeah.
with?
Oh
Okay,
yeah.
so like Rotor's in um, I don't know if it is called actually Rotor, or if it's the Turbonator Cop. Either way, there's like a Rotor reference, and then Levi like took a picture. Like, is that Rotor? I was like, yeah, that's Rotor, all right. And he was like, dude, that's awesome. Like,
Yeah, I mean that's the kind of thing like when you pick it up, you pick it up. I mean George was also right about, you know, sometimes you got to explain it to somebody. If you want to put it in there, you got to explain it to someone. So I've been recently fond of footnotes,
mhm.
and especially I recently wrote a zine called Crowdfund Your Fucking Life, and in it I made a lot of footnotes, a lot of footnotes. So it's like this, so you understand clearly what I'm talking about. I think that
Right.
that's something that like since he kind of like led me down that path, I think it's helped me with the writing that I do because it gives me the ability to be like, okay, if you really want to put that joke in there, maybe you got to kind of give some training wheels to the reference.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a totally cool and equitable way to do it for people who are just kind of maybe getting into the game for the first time.
Yeah, that's always like a huge like Marvel Comics thing too,
Yeah,
is putting in the like the breaking the fourth wall notes. And I always like that. I always appreciate that. And like I like doing it, and like I like when other people do it. It's like you're reading me your book, right?
right.
It's
And
not just like a textbook of rules.
that's I think the personal touch. And again, I'm not ever going to come on screen and shit on someone else's game. But I
No.
also think that there is a lack of personal touch that a lot of people forget to put in their games because the idea that you're going to try to create something that's marketable and try to create something that you can sell and make money on, which is we're not allergic to money here, we like money, but we also and one of the things I've always appreciated about you as a creator is that you've never been afraid to add that personal touch to everything that you've written, whether it was Neon Lords of the Toxic Wasteland, Cyberpunk, when you and I worked together on Zombie Brain Eaters. I think it's that personal touch that really makes any kind of RPG shine.
It's a big trademark thing. Not necessarily trademark like like it's like your signature style, right?
Yeah,
So like to try to sit like in my like write, I want to try to write as close to like my voice, I guess is what they
yeah,
call it, as possible. And like I mean, I skirted the line. I mean, like with Cyberpunk Red, like it definitely a lot of notes came back, right? Like
oh yeah,
like well, you can't like so I like would just like take that line and move a little bit to the left a little bit, and then until they finally were like, okay, yeah. But there's a lot still made it, which I was surprised. I was expecting more cuts,
yeah. Let's
but
talk about that balance though, real quick, because working for a company that puts out Cyberpunk Red, um, you have to kind of stay within certain lines when it comes to like what the expectation is of how the product is supposed to sound while still making it sound like it wasn't just a staff writer who wrote it.
right.
I know you got a lot of notes back, but what was that process like for you? How did you find a way to reconcile and get the best of both worlds out of it?
So speaking only through the Artelsorian method, I don't know if it's like not patented or anything, but like I don't know if other companies do it this way, but it was like okay, so they're like I pitched the idea for the Cyber Pets revitalization, and they went with it. They're like, okay, we need like an outline by this date, a first draft by this date, and then we're going to print this date. So it's like okay, cool. So then, of course, I get like close to the outline, smack the outline, and they're like, okay, like this is cool. This doesn't work with the lore. Like this company is now defunct, and like during the red, like the like deep lore cuts. Like
That's awesome.
Jay, like the product lead of Cyberpunk is phenomenal. Like was unbelievably like very knowledgeable about the world and everything. So I was like, okay, cool. So then you just shift fire on that, and then so over my first draft, that was when huge, massive swaths. They're like, this is not at all what we thought. And I was like, oh crap. So I was like, okay, don't take that personal. Like, I'm not gonna like, okay. So then I just shifted and it was bang on. They're like, okay, yep, this is what we're talking about. So it's like, okay, cool. So then and then there was just some like cleanups on some stat block lines and stuff, but it was pretty actually a lot less painful than I was like leading it up to be. Like sitting at the computer, I have like my Chromebook from the like Mike Pondsmith early Cyberpunk 2020 books. I got my red, and I'm like, yes, this is awesome. I'm working in Night City, baby. And then I'm like crunking away, and it's like, man, like, oh, what if like this is not right? Like you got that imposter syndrome, I guess,
Of
at that
course,
point,
yeah.
right? So it's like, this is like not gonna go over well. They're gonna hate this. Like, I'm never gonna be able to work in this town again. I'm getting banished from Night City. So
Yeah.
then it ended up actually being like a lot, and they're like, okay, yep, this is perfect. I was like, and they're like, we're going to print next week. I was like, oh,
And, to that point, you talk about imposter syndrome. Do you think that has lessened for you over time now that you've written for so many different systems and found a way to channel your voice into each system that you're writing for? I mean, right now, you're doing it within the world of Vastgrim with the add-on book you're doing for the Squirmish Kickstarter that's going on. It might still be going on by the time this episode airs, but Brian Collin, friend of the Rats, you're in there working on that. I know you've done work for WHPA, you've done work for lots of people. How's it striking that balance for you?
so imposter syndrome wise, now I don't have it at all. Like, thankfully, I guess it depends on the project. Like Cyberpunk, like yes, if it was like if I got to do something for Hero Quest, definitely. Like Games Workshop, 1,000%, right? So
Right.
it's I guess it's all level. When it comes to my own stuff, and then like I feel pretty comfortable in my Neon Lord skin when it comes to like I don't have imposter syndrome with Toxic Wasteland at all, right? Like
Right.
that's like I could do no harm in there, like as far as I'm concerned. Well, I mean, some other people might beg to differ, but either way.
Yeah.
um, but when it comes to like, and then like obviously the bros, like you know what you're getting when you
Yeah.
like, hey, do you want to write this for me? So like I don't have an issue with like the people I know and the people I work with literally every day. But it's like always like the unknown factor of like, oh man, are they gonna get me? Like do they get me?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's you working a gig for Artal Sorian is like you getting to sit in with your favorite band. I've been getting more used to it. With 321 RPG, it's like breathing. When it comes to writing for other companies, I've done some work for Necromancer Games recently, and it's funny because the thing that I always worry about is game mechanics. Like I don't worry about the actual writing, the stories, the traps, the monsters, anything like that. It's like, am I getting the game mechanics right? Am I getting the lore of their world correct?
Mm,
And I'm gonna hopefully work on something soon with Joey. And I was like, hey, this is what I want from you. I want you to be the guy who like breaks down the lore, breaks down the actual stats, and gives me a lot of great input and feedback because my brain is like I got a bubble brain. So like me trying to remember all the lore and the nuances, unless I'm watching it on TV or been reading it in the comic form, it's just I dropped out of college
yeah.
for a reason.
Yeah, there's like that's the big thing is like the IP property holder needs to be a lore master, which
100%.
I'm very very guilty of not realistically being that. I need to do a lore Bible for sure because people always ask me 1,000 questions. I'm like, I have no idea. Look like look it up. It might be in a book somewhere.
It's something I didn't even think about. I know television shows and movies and in universes like that. I imagine Marvel Comics are the same thing, having lore Bibles. Like I actually was talking to Gio the other day about it. I was reading the Fantastic Four and I'm like, oh man, I think you got to be like really smart to write Reed Richards because he says all these like crazy words. And he was like, yeah, I think they have like a thing where they kind of, if you want to do this kind of science, it's this. If you want to have this kind of science, it's that. And, bringing it to 321 RPG, we have a continuous world. It's a world that, with our first thing started, in our first adventure in 2005, we've gone back to 1993, we've gone to 2060, and there are things that carry over from the start of time in our world up until, the latest point in time we're at. And eventually I'm like, I got to sit down and I got to write all this down. Like I know it,
Mhm.
and George knows that we keep track of it in our heads, but you know, if this guy's related to this guy who's related to this guy, and he invented this and his nephew invented that, and this creature's here, that it's going to be confusing for someone coming in and writing something for the first time.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, lore Bible I think is essential because like there's a like project kind of like in the works right now of other people spearheading some Neon Lord stuff, and they have a lot of questions, and I'm just like, I should have had a lore Bible.
Yeah. I mean, you opened your SRD up a while back for Neon Lords, and people have been making cool Neon Lords content for, I'd say, a couple, few years now,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah, here and there, there's some that pop up.
And most of it, I think, is just it's an adventure that happens in that world and that realm. But I don't recall any of it getting too heavy on the lore. But
No.
is it exciting to you now that people are coming to you being like, yeah, we want to do this, but we want to be able to kind of really immerse the people who are going to play these adventures in your world?
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. And like I'm not like a lore like lore hound, a lore lawyer, I guess. So cuz I mean like it's I tried to make it kind of like convoluted and like contradictory on purpose, but then like kind of got lost in the weeds a little bit, so I kind of
Right.
dialed that back a bit because not every chrono stage is going to interpret the same thing, right?
Right. It's like Doctor
But
Who is an unreliable narrator.
yeah, exactly. So with that being said, in like the cartoon Saturday morning cartoon aspect, like I like if someone wanted to be like, oh well, I want to like introduce this character and this story arc, as long as like the three mega cities are there, Earth is URTH, and the Space Federation hates us, and no one likes space, then boom, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's cool. I think that's basically like if you're going to do it, here is the flavor. Here's how to spell stuff.
Yeah.
Here's what goes boom. And then,
Hmm.
let people run off and do the things that they want to do. Yeah, I find that really a good way to approach it because, you're not trying to make a cinematic universe with like 35 movies over like, I don't know, 12, 15 years.
No, and even if it contradicts, that's like, I mean, look at how many contradictions are in like GI Joe and stuff.
Speaking of G.I. Joe, one of the things I definitely wanted to talk to you about tonight, especially because we're talking about influence and the things that were formative to us and bringing us to the dance. What was your best toy year? And what I mean is the year when you went to the toy store and were like, yeah, this is it.
So
I've arrived.
I have to look at the exact date. I know it was a birthday. A birthday. Did you ever have a Hills department store?
We did not.
HI. Okay. So I was probably too old to be buying toys. So like I gotta get the date right on this. 93.
Oh,
So I was
yeah.
11. So like stone protectors. Do you familiar with the stone protectors?
Oh, yeah.
I have one. I have a couple floating around. I think they're in my turtles box. But so like for the uninitiative, stone protectors were the boy version of the Norfin troll doll. So
Yeah.
they had a rock in their chest. No, those are battle trolls. They have a rock in their chest. They're the troll doll. You pull their arm down. They had a sparking mechanism that would ignite the stone in their chest. So I got a couple of those that year, and then I had a windfall at Hills. They must have had a sale going on because I got like a ton of X-Men action figures.
Oh, that was the year for it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so Toy Biz was like at its peak. I got like Weapon X. I remember getting the Gambit at that point. I believe like I had a Professor X, and I think he might have went in with that lot. Sauron, is that how you say his
Yep.
name? Okay, because like I like you know how you see a title and how you say it to yourself may not necessarily be what the rest of the world says it.
Right, right.
So, Sauron was there, and I want Cable. That was like the Cable
Oh, yeah.
that had like the Gatling gun reel.
Yep. Pockets and pouches. As
Oh
far
yeah,
as the eye can say.
yeah. So maybe it wasn't Cable. Anyway, either way, there was like a slew of X-Men figures. That was like the best haul year for sure.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's 1984, close to 1985, because in that frame, any toy store you went into, you had Master of the Universe, you had G.I. Joe, and you had Star Wars still on the shelf because they
Oh
really didn't
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
fall
yeah.
out of favor until like 86. But that
Hmm.
was good because when it fell out of favor in kind of 86, they were all in clearance. But like there was such a weird kind of golden age where, between like 84 and 87, you had like Silverhawks, you had Thundercats, you had Ninja Turtles, you had whatever else came out at the time. Like everything in the Brave Star, everything in their mother came out between those years and maybe a year or two after that. And I just remember like I don't recall any kid just collecting one thing because it was all about the packaging, Transformers even. It was all about like your imagination being like, okay, I'm gonna get like Clutch from G.I. Joe, but I'm also gonna get Mechanic.
Yeah.
And if my parents let me, I'm gonna get this Ewok because you're
Yep.
you're you're building multiple collections at the same time. But all of those outfits, all of like the playability of those characters, the imagination that you got from those different worlds. Because think of it at the same time, like you're playing with these different toys, they're all from different worlds. Some of them variations on the theme, like essentially like you had Thundercats, which was cats in space, then you had birds in space with the Silverhawks. But like to me, and I think for a lot of people who are, and I'm 45 when we're recording this, in that kind of age range, there was a lot of cool ideas that you could pull from in any kind of story that you want to tell. When you were young, I know you were making your own D&D games, but did any of these toys or these things that you got when you were younger spark ideas to tell your own stories with?
Oh, of course. Yeah, you had the yeah, so the original, MCU at that point, right? Like
Yeah.
they're like the Hasbro collect connected universe, whatever they wanted to try to do. Yeah, so of course you had like, a turtle show up and like team up with He-Man before, now it's an actual IP, but back then, yeah,
Yeah.
you did all that stuff. You played out your team ups.
With that, what about comics around that time period too? Because hand in hand, I mean, obviously we could talk about movies, but comic books were huge. And it's funny because I've been reading on the Marvel Unlimited app, and when the covers come up, I always like laugh at how much comics cost. Because
Mm-hmm.
today it's like $4 to $6 for a single issue. Back then it's like a
Yes.
dollar and 10 cents, $1.25, and you're like, oh man, I would have ruled with $10 back in the day.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna pull up a year too because I was Image Comics, Spawn. All my friends and everybody had to have a Spawn number one, right?
Oh yeah,
So what's that? 92? Yeah. So yeah, around like early 90s was gimmick covers. So like I remember like I had to have the Ghost Rider glow in the dark cover. Like, and then there was Robin 2 was a Lynn Static where you like you pulled down the thing and he was like
yep,
standing on cars and his cape waved.
oh
So
yeah,
like all the gimmick covers, I was there for them all. Then there was a Fantastic Four. It was all white. It was embossed with the Human Torch flying. Had to have that one. And then like the Executioner song,
oh yeah.
like the like miniseries with all the holographic cards on each one.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, granted, at the end of the day, that's what like kind of destroyed the comic industry for a little while. But while it was happening, man, it felt good. So, with Neon Lords, gonna swing back to that for a minute. You base the gameplay off of like what style of system?
So it's based off of Basic Edition of Dungeons and Dragons with a little Dungeon Crawl Classics thrown in for good measure. It was never originally supposed to be based off of BX. So like I mean this like
Yep.
you're like you start out and you're like okay I want to make a game. Okay, well how do I do that? What do I do? How do I make a book? What do I put in it? Like there's 1,001 questions you have. It's like okay, yeah, making a game's fun, but like putting it in the right order and everything. So it's like okay, so my intention was to make it based off of Basic Edition first, and then like write it as Basic Edition is written in the book, and then do what Basic Edition did and do like an advanced version, like with its own proprietary system, just to kind of get an idea how to make a game. But then like the BX version was just like BX is the perfect system,
Yeah.
right? Like
Agreed.
so like and it works for everything. Like you can do so much with it. It's so versatile that just adding stuff on top of it was enough to make it far, like it's not far removed from BX, but it's enough to be its own thing from BX.
For people who understand modern RPGs and people who have been old school gamers for a long time, it's like a very level playing field
I think so,
where,
yeah.
anyone can get in. And especially, if you're not using THAC0, you're like, all right, cool.
Yep.
Roll the
Yeah.
hit, roll initiative. What do you want to do? How do you want to kill this beast?
Yeah.
But thinking back though, back in the day, you're growing up, you got these toys influencing you, get these comics influence you, you got the movies of the time influencing you. Do you think you still would have gone with a BX style game if you were creating a game back when you were young?
The original game was actually like a Warhammer skirmish game.
Really?
Yeah, so like that card for some reason, I wish I remember the name. So you remember like the old banner printing programs on the dot matrix?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we had like the name. I printed out the huge banner, the name of the game, had it up on the wall. It had like everything. I wish I remember the name of it, but it was essentially like a role playing skirmish hybrid. So
Yeah.
like I don't think I would have, and but then even then I wasn't even playing. That was like second edition, so we were playing D&D second edition. So I would have probably just done that.
Now, with that said, talking about skirmishes, you are also in the process of working on a board game called Roller
Yeah,
Brawl.
that is true.
Why don't you tell the viewers a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Roller Brawl is a hybrid table or hybrid skirmish board game hybrid, I guess is whatever we're calling it. I said hybrid twice, I get that. But so it's set in the Neon Lords world where it is a 500-year tournament happens every 1,000 years in the known galaxy, and then this roller brawl happens to fall on Earth in Neoterra where Neon Lords takes place, and we're 499 years into the 500-year tournament. And so all the beings from across the dimensions and galaxies and Neoterra come and we're competing in this grand tournament of roller brawl, and we're at the almost the end of it. So essentially, you pick your team of brawlers, and then you go around the track like roller derby, and then you score points by taking the ball through the different what are they called things. I
Goals,
don't know.
goal
Yeah,
thingies.
goals. Yeah, goal thingies. I don't sports ball very well, but
Yeah.
so yeah, so you take the ball through the goals. You score 3 points if you have the ball, 1 point if you don't. Like as long as you're going through the gates, they're called gates.
And the aesthetic is purely, that Neon Lord aesthetic, color palette. Very exciting, very fast paced.
Yeah. It's super fast paced. It's about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how you really want to play. I know there's some different play styles where you could just beat the crap out of the other team and knock them out before like they even get to 21, or you could play the long game and like sports ball it across the field and throwing it, catching it, and all that good stuff if you wanted. But play style may vary.
Well, very cool. Brian, it's been great chatting with you tonight. A couple more quick questions I want to ask you before we go home on this episode. One of the things that's always fascinated me about people that I've just met in all walks of life and the things that they love is, what would you take to a desert island with you? Like if you had an album, a movie, and a game
Mm.
that you would be not on that desert island with forever, but until at least you got rescued, probably within, we'll say, 4 to 6 months.
All right, so we got album, movie, game.
Yeah.
Album is At the Gates, Slaughter of the Soul.
Hell
One of
yeah.
the greatest albums ever made. Phenomenal. It still holds up to this day. I'm going to probably put it on after this and listen to it. Game would be Metal Gear Solid for PS1
Yeah.
because it's so much variety to it. It's such a blast to play. Book. So yeah, the problem is I don't really read books that well,
Comics are
but
fine.
well, so no, I mean, I'll answer a real book. So I actually have been reading more to try to, be a more astute person when we do have all these conversations and stuff, because Joey's an avid reader and it's hard to keep up sometimes with these people. So I got a bunch of cyberpunk books I've been reading, especially to get into the genre, because working for Artel and then working on Netcrawl with James Ponzano. So I'm reading, like I'm almost done with Snow Crash, and I would take Snow Crash. It's like, if you've never read Snow Crash, it is a wild ride. It's fun. The writing is insanely good, and it's just a great book. Like it's just a fun read. If a non-reader reads it, it's good, right?
That's quite an endorsement. And finally, movie. What would the movie be?
Oh yeah, original Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
Like it's my favorite movie of all time. Nothing. It's like it's the well. There's some stuff didn't age well in it, sadly, but like it's still really fun, and there's a lot of good parts in it, and it's just a fun watch.
Well, very cool. Brian, where can people find Neon Lords on the internet?
So you could go to neonlords.com. That has, I believe, probably a link to the link tree, or you can literally Google Neon Lords. It's Toxic Wasteland. We are the only thing that pops up. You can hit us up on the Discord. It's been popping as we've been sitting here talking, just popped. Now it's like nonstop. People loving to talk about other things. We talk about 1-900 numbers on there all the time and all that good stuff that you think you forgot, but you never really did.
Brian, thanks so much for joining us again this evening. I'm John Hambone McGuire, your host of Rats Chat. This is a Sewer Rats production. Sewer Rats out of the sewers and onto the streets all year long at an RPG shop near you. Paraphrasing the late Jerry Springer, be nice to yourself and each other. Take care.